Good morning. We are continuing on our series of 15 different plumb lines related to marriage and family. We're on our third, and here is our third plumb line. And this one may sound harsh. It's not intended to sound harsh, but I do want it to hear sort of the stark nature of the wording. Do not exploit one another. Do not exploit one another. When you think of that word exploit, it sort of carries with it the idea of using another person. And it sounds incredibly harsh. Like when you think of the crime of exploitation, somebody exploits a minor or they exploit another person. We use that language in terms of things that are abusive, in terms of things that involve the trafficking of another human. The word can have different meanings. If you have great exploits, right, then it means like you have great feats. That's sort of in a noun form. But to exploit another, as I am using the term, means to use someone or make use of something or someone meanly or unfairly in a way where you're taking advantage of them. Now, when you exploit someone, you are exploiting, more often than not, a weakness. Now, there are ways people exploit a strength. They take a strength maybe and they turn it to a weakness. Like think of like in a football game where an offensive lineman gets a strong defensive lineman leaning against him, and then he moves and he exploits the power in a sense and then uses it leverage against him. That's a form of manipulation in a physical sense. But on the whole, we exploit people in terms of highlighting their weakness, or when their weakness surfaces in relationship, and we have an opportunity to do one of two things. So someone, let's say, is easily angered, and I know that about them. So I say something, and I see them start to get upset. Now I have an opportunity. I can diffuse their anger, and I can offer the strength of self-control or the strength of kindness or the strength of gentleness and meekness to them to distill and extinguish their anger. Or I can say something else, a little edgy. And all of a sudden I can inflame them. I can let them spin out. We call that gaslighting. And I can cause them to burn. And I'm actually exploiting a weakness that they have. They have a propensity to not be self-controlled, and instead of me offering an alternative to help them be self-controlled, where I offer a strength to come and shore up their weakness to keep them from falling into sin, I actually exploit them and I highlight their weakness. I might even blow wind in their weakness. I might inflame their weakness and cause their weakness now to turn into outright sin. And then I feel in a manipulative way like I have the moral high ground against them. This happens in families. It happens in marriages. It happens with parents and children and husbands and wives and siblings and all of those things. In a marriage, you have a lot of ways that you relate to weakness. Sometimes in every marriage, one person or another has certain character strengths and character weaknesses that can be exploited. They have bodily characteristics of strength and weakness that can be exploited. They have emotional strengths and weaknesses that can be exploited. Financially, there's financial ways. A husband could be very controlling and hold things financially in such a way that he doesn't allow his wife any access, and as a result, she is in a weak posture, and he is exploiting in ways that weakness. Or maybe he gets mad at her for overspending, but he has never sat down with the budget and explained how the whole thing works and how they're processing things. Maybe it goes the other way, and it's the case with the husband who can't handling things well, but they haven't communicated well. Instead, anger is just what emerges rather than good communication. So you have weaknesses, proclivities, propensities towards baser things, and now those weaknesses are just getting exploited. Past vulnerabilities and hurts create kinds of weaknesses that can be exploited. If you know that your spouse was wounded by a parent, let's say, and so you needle them or poke them in the area of that wound rather than be an object of healing, or they have a past thing that's bothered them, or they have something about their self-esteem that is a low point for them, and you poke and you prod it, or you don't add a healing salve or balm to it, then you are likely guilty of exploiting their weakness. And if you're going to have a good marriage, if you're going to have a good family, you can't exploit. Let me give you a scripture about this. Romans 15, verses 1 through 3. We who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. This is about exploitation. Strong doesn't mean necessarily you're categorically strong. There's nobody who's just categorically strong in every way. But there are ways that you might be strong that another is weak in. And you have a choice. Offer your strength to shore up their weakness, or don't offer, or maybe inflame, or maybe be passive and let their weakness be exploited when you could offer your strength. He says here that we have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak, not to come and gaslight, not to come and inflame, not to come and demean, condescend, but instead to come alongside of, in a way, and bear with them, not to please ourselves. Sometimes it's easy to seize that moral high ground. See, you're losing control now. You're getting angry. There you go again. You're spinning out. And the more you talk, the more you spin them out. I've been guilty of that before. We've been guilty of that in marriage. We've been guilty of that parenting. We've been guilty of that in relationships. Goodness sakes, that's an exploitation. Let each of us please his neighbor, verse 2 says, for his good, to build him up. Our job isn't to please ourselves. Our job is to be selfless and live for the other. So when I see a weakness in my wife, or a weakness in my child, or a weakness in my parents, or a weakness, you see a weakness in a sibling, your job isn't to say, how can I use that? Your job is to say, how can I help them with that? How can I work in such a way in their life where their good emerges because of my presence in their life as I offer my strength to build them up? Verse 3, for Christ did not please himself. So I'm going to go to the gospel. I'm going to look at the gospel and I'm to say, if this person is weak in this area, I will not exploit them in this area. I'm not going to be passive aggressive with them if they are unsure of themselves and insecure. I'm not going to be aggressive with them if they have been the victim of abuse and are fearful, intimidated. For Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of those who reproached you fell on me. Jesus in the gospel bears my shame. He bears my reproach. A way of thinking about this is that Jesus would rather be sinned against than sin. So you have an opportunity, even if you're being sinned against, to take that on and not become the person who sins, not the person who exploits the weakness of another. Don't exploit one another. That is a plumb line of marriage and family. May the Lord bless you today.